Heidi Rader here in the Alaska Garden. I'm with UAF Cooperative Extension Service in Tanana Chiefs Conference. We're at the Georgeson Botanical Garden today, and today I'm going to talk all about when to harvest which crops and some ideas about how to use them and preserve them as well. So let's start with zucchini. So if you're growing a zucchini for the fair, you might want to let it get as big as possible. But if you're not, you might want to harvest it a little bit earlier because it's going to taste better. So first you want a knife, and it's a little bit prickly, but you're going to get in here and and cut off the stem. This one's a little on the small size. This is a nice size. This will be great in stir fries and to eat fresh. If you harvest too small, you're sacrificing some of your yield, and you could get a lot more zucchini if you let it grow a little bit longer. If you let it get too big, it's not going to taste as good, and the quality will go down a little bit, but it might still be great in things like zucchini bread or zucchini muffins. So zucchini is a type of summer squash. If you're going to harvest a winter squash, you'd want to wait until the skin was not punctured by your fingernail. Summer squash is not going to develop that hard of a skin. Summer squash doesn't keep as long as winter squash. You can store winter squash for quite a long time. You also want to harvest those after the plants begin to die back. Here we have another type of summer squash. It's a crookneck squash, and again, you're going to cut the stem, and this is a nice size to harvest these. Also great in stir fry, and you can store in your fridge for a few days as well. Another thing you can do with summer squash leaves is you can actually eat the squash blossoms. You can add some cheese or herbs inside these and fry it. And actually this one is getting to be a little bit past its prime. Let's find another one. This is a much better squash blossom here. So you want to harvest these before they start to die. If it's a real rainy summer, you can also pollinate your squash. This is a male flower, and you can find the female flowers. They're going to have the squash on them and pollinate them while they're open. So that's what the female flower looks like. So when you're deciding when to harvest things, one great tool is to look back at your seed catalog. You need to make sure that you kept good records and labeled your varieties really well so you know what you're growing. But you can see here, you've got a lot of different sizes for things like daikon radishes. You've got everything from about 3 inches long to almost 16 inches long. So if you harvest these Miyashigi or Summer Cross number 3 when they're only 2 inches long, you're going to sacrifice a lot of your yield by doing that. But if you wait until your small radishes get as big as some of those other ones, they're going to crack before they do that, and they won't be very good for eating. Here's another great example of the variation in, for example, carrot sizes. So the Atlas variety is only going to be about 2 inches long, while your Sugar Snacks variety is going to be 8 inches long. So you need to know what you're growing so you can harvest at the right time. So let's move back. Let's talk a little bit about snap peas and other types of peas. So there's snap peas, there's snow peas, and there's shelling peas. And you need to know when to harvest which ones. So for snap peas, you want to wait until the pod is kind of plump and full looking. But you don't want to wait too long because it's going to get woody tasting and pretty unappetizing. And when you harvest the peas, you want to hold on to the plant while you harvest so you don't pull the plant out accidentally. So I'll show you a few different types here. This one is almost the ideal size. It could be a little bit plumper. This one is just too big, so it's not going to taste as good. It's going to taste a little bit starchy and woody. So always check the bottom of the plants first. That's where the oldest peas are going to be. This one's a little too small. It probably tastes fine, but if you let it develop, you're going to get a much larger pea if you wait a little bit. So those are your snap peas. For shelling peas, you want to wait until the pea is fully developed. So it's going to be nice and plump, and you don't eat the shell, so you want the peas inside the shell to be pretty big. With snap peas and snow peas, you actually eat the entire pod, so you don't want to wait until the peas are very big. So with shelling peas, just open up a few and check them to make sure the peas are a nice size. With snow peas, you want the pod to be flat. And again, you want to know which variety you're growing, because some varieties like Oregon sugar pod, they're going to be quite big, like about this big. But there are other varieties that will be pretty small. But you do want the pod to be pretty flat, and you don't want to wait for it to bulk up like the snap peas and the shelling peas. So that's a little bit about peas. Now let's talk about snap beans. So a good way to tell if the snap beans are ready is if you grab one and you bend it and it snaps. That's one way to tell. This is a yellow snap bean, so that's also a good indication that it's ready. The smaller ones are still green and they're not yellow yet. So this one's not ready yet. And also when you bend it, it doesn't break. And so that means it's a little on the small side. And again, just hold on to the plant while you harvest, and you really want to pick things like peas and beans every few days so they don't get too big and taste woody. Snap beans and squash are also very frost sensitive, so if you see a frost in the forecast, then you're going to want to harvest as much as possible before the frost comes. So that's a little bit about snap beans. Snap beans and peas are great in stir fry. You can also pickle them, and if you blanch them, you can freeze them. Blanching is basically submerging the vegetable in hot water and then cooling it off really quickly. Then you want to drain off as much excess water as possible and freeze the vegetables. If you freeze it on a tray, then you can easily take as much of the vegetables as you want at a time. If you freeze it all together in a bag, it might be kind of an ice block and hard to use when you want to. Now let's talk a little bit about greens. So greens grow really well in Alaska. These are some nice looking collards. Greens, the way you want to harvest is you want to harvest the outer leaves first and leave the smaller leaves, because they're going to develop into large leaves. So you can either cut or break off these leaves from the outside and just leave these smaller leaves on the inside, and then strip off the stems. You generally don't want to eat the stems because they're pretty tough and fibrous. Greens can also be frozen or added to all kinds of things like pizza or calzone. When you blanch the greens, they're going to shrink significantly in size. So even if you harvest a large tub or bag of greens, they're going to shrink in size and they won't take up nearly as much space in your freezer as you thought. Another thing you can do with greens is you can make chips, like kale chips. You just add a little olive oil and salt and put in your oven at about 300 for a half hour or so, and they make really nice chips. And a little bit healthier than most chips that you might get at the grocery store. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these onions. These are a type of green onion, and so these are ready to harvest because you're going to actually eat this green part here. If you were growing onions for the bulbs, these would not be ready, and you'd want to wait until the tops start to grow back and you have a nicely formed onion. and then you can store those for later use. This type of onion is always just eaten fresh, and you want to use it as soon as possible. This is like a bunching onion or a evergreen onion. Now let's talk a little bit about carrots. Again, lots of different varieties of carrots. You kind of want to look at the tops of the carrots to see how big the top is, and that will give you an indication that the carrot is a nice size. So you kind of look for a thick stalk, and then you want to slowly and gently pull up, maybe with a little bit of a twist. And that's not a very nicely formed one. Let's see if we can find a better one here. And with carrots, you can either eat them fresh, or to store them, you don't want to store for long-term storage, you want to remove the tops. And you can either wash them and let them dry off a bit, or just leave them unwashed. And Cooperative Extension has a helpful publication that outlines all the different humidity and temperatures for ideal long-term storage for things like carrots, beets, potatoes. In another video, I showed you Terry Reichert's root cellar, and of course carrots and beets and potatoes are a great thing to store in a root cellar if you have it, or of course you can also freeze them or pickle them too. Another thing you could do is just make a big pot of soup with all different types of vegetables, and then freeze some of that soup for later. We've got beets and turnips here too that I harvested. This one's a little bit on the small side. These are all a little bit small, but they'll taste really good. If you let your turnip get too big, you might have cracking, you might have more disease, and it just might taste a little bit woodier. So sometimes it's good to err on the smaller side, but definitely think about what variety it is and how big it's supposed to be. This one is supposed to be a pretty small one. It's a Tokyo Cross variety, and they're supposed to be harvested nice and small. If you wait too long too, some things might start to bolt. So over here, you can see this lettuce, and most of it has bolted already. This one is long past its prime, and these are all starting to bolt too. Here we have a little bit of lettuce that is probably still good to eat, and this is leaf lettuce, so what you can do is just harvest a couple of leaves from the outer parts of the head. So lettuce, there are lots of different types of lettuce. There's baby salad greens, there are small heads, there's large heads, there's some that are leaf lettuce varieties, and then there's some that are more of a head variety, like a butterhead lettuce or like your iceberg lettuce. So again, you need to be aware of what type of variety you're growing. And with the baby salad greens, you can just harvest gradually with scissors as it matures. It'll only take about 30 days, and then that will continue to grow back. With leaf lettuce, you'll also want to just harvest the outer leaves and let the head continue to grow. With head lettuce though, you're going to just want to harvest that entire head all at once before it bolts like these lettuce have. And what you can do, if you have a bunch of lettuce that's bolted, then just harvest it and replant more lettuce, and you'll have more lettuce in a few weeks. Let's talk about this broccoli here. Again, you need to keep up on harvesting your broccoli, or it's going to go to flower or seed too. So some broccoli puts out a lot of side shoots, and these can be harvested and used right away or frozen. This one is getting close to opening up, so you do want to harvest it when it's pretty tight, but not too tight. This one here would continue to develop if I didn't harvest it, and so this one's just a little bit too tight. And this one's probably just right. So after you harvest your broccoli head, depending on what type of variety you're growing, you can continue to let the side shoots develop and harvest those as well to continue to have a nice harvest. Okay, let's move over here to these nice looking tomatillos. So these are used in salsas. They are used in Mexican cooking. They've got this papery husk, and what you want to do is wait until that papery husk starts to open, and then that's when you can harvest the tomatillo. You of course don't eat the husk, but you eat the tomatillo inside. All right, and just getting back to the lettuce, lettuce is pretty difficult to store for any period of time, but one thing you can do is store it in your refrigerator at least for a few days, or you can harvest it as you need it. But when you harvest your lettuce, if you can quickly cool it down with some cool water and then spin it in a salad spinner, that will keep it nice and crispy. If you don't do that, it's gonna wilt faster. So cool it down with some nice cold water and then spin it, and it will stay nice and crispy at least for a few days. Now let's talk about these scarlet runner beans here. These are scarlet runner beans. They're growing up the pole. There's also other types of pole beans. And you can either eat them as a snap bean, or you can wait until they develop nice large beans inside and use them as a dry bean, or even save seeds for next year. So your biggest beans are going to be on the bottom, and as you go up, they're going to get smaller and smaller. So these are too small here to harvest. They're very bendable so that they don't snap when I break them. And let's see. This is a pretty good size for a snap bean, but it's getting a little bit big too. You can see the seeds developing. Here's a nice one for a snap bean to eat fresh. And you can see when I bend it, it snaps and there aren't large seeds in the middle. If you do want to save these for a dried bean, then you want to wait, just leave them on the plant as long as possible and wait until these beans form. And then you'll dry these and either eat them or save them for seed for next year. All right, so this week is Fair Week in Fairbanks, and lots of people like to grow giant vegetables like cabbage or zucchini. This is a variety that's probably OS cross cabbage, and if you want to win at the fair, that's a good variety to grow. But if you want to win at the dinner table, you might want to grow a better tasting variety. So this is pretty hollow, and you're going to get a lot of cabbage, but probably not going to taste quite as good as the smaller, more compact heads. You also want to think about if it's a summer cabbage or a storage cabbage. So summer cabbages should be eaten pretty quickly, or frozen, or made into something like sauerkraut. But storage cabbages will keep in your root cellar for a very long time. So again, it's so important to know what varieties you're growing and what your intended purpose is for those varieties. Cooperative Extension Service has a lot of information on proper storage for vegetables, and as well as recipes and things. So check out our website and publications on that. And that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I'm Heidi Rader here in the Alaska Garden.